The pearl buttons on the wedding dress refused to cooperate with Celeste's trembling fingers. Each tiny sphere seemed to mock her as she stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite of St. Catherine's Cathedral. The silk gown, tailored perfectly for Victoria's curves, hung awkwardly on her smaller frame. The bodice gaped slightly at the chest, and the sleeves felt too loose around her arms. "Stop fidgeting," Eleanor Monroe snapped, her voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. "You look fine." Fine. That was the highest compliment Celeste had ever received from her mother. She stared at her reflection, seeing Victoria's face staring back at her. They were identical twins, born minutes apart, but somehow those minutes had created a lifetime of difference. Victoria was the golden child, the one who sparkled in every room, who commanded attention with her confident smile and bold laughter. Celeste was the shadow, the quiet one who preferred books to parties, who found peace in her art studio rather than social gatherings. "Where is she?" Celeste whispered, her voice barely audible over the organ music drifting from the cathedral. "Where is Victoria?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. She adjusted Celeste's veil with sharp, precise movements. "Your sister has made her choice. Now you must make yours." The morning had started like any other wedding day should. Victoria had been in high spirits, chattering about her honeymoon plans, while stylists fussed over her hair and makeup. Blackwood was everything a woman could want in a husband, according to the society pages. He was wealthy beyond measure, devastatingly handsome, and owner of a business empire that spanned 3 continents. The fact that he had lost his sight in a car accident 2 years ago only added to his mysterious appeal. But then Victoria's phone had buzzed, a single text message that changed everything. Celeste had watched her sister's face drain of color. As she read the words, Victoria had grabbed her purse, mumbled something about needing air, and simply vanished. No explanation, no goodbye, just an empty bridal suite and 300 wedding guests waiting in the cathedral below. "This is insane," Celeste said, turning away from the mirror. "I can't do this. He'll know immediately that I'm not Victoria." Eleanor's grip on her daughter's shoulders was firm, almost painful. "Julian Blackwood is blind, Celeste. He sees with his hands, not his eyes. You and Victoria have the same height, the same build, the same voice when you try. He won't know the difference. But it's wrong. It's lying to him on what should be the most important day of his life. It's survival," Eleanor hissed. "You have any idea what Julian Blackwood could do to our family if this wedding falls through? Your father's business, our home, everything we've worked for will be destroyed. One phone call from Julian, and we'll lose it all." Celeste felt sick. The weight of her family's financial troubles had always been present, lurking in hushed conversations behind closed doors. Victoria's engagement to Julian had been their salvation, a business merger disguised as a love story. Now that salvation hung by a thread, and Celeste held the scissors. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Thomas, Julian's butler, stood in the doorway with his usual composed expression. "Excuse me, Mrs. Monroe. Mr. Blackwood is wondering if Miss Victoria is ready. The guests are becoming restless." Eleanor smiled, her mask of maternal warmth sliding into place. "Of course, Victoria is just making final adjustments. She'll be down momentarily." Thomas nodded and withdrew, but not before his eyes lingered on Celeste for a moment longer than necessary. There was something in his gaze, a quiet intelligence that made her wonder if he suspected something was amiss. "You see," Eleanor said once the door closed, "even his own staff can't tell the difference. Now stop being selfish and think about your family." Celeste closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision crushing down on her. In her mind, she could see Julian waiting at the altar. She had met him only twice during the engagement, brief introductions where Victoria had dominated the conversation, but she remembered his voice, deep and warm, and the way he had smiled when he spoke about music. She remembered thinking that Victoria was lucky to marry someone who seemed so genuinely kind. Now she was about to deceive that same kind man on his wedding day. "I need 5 minutes," Celeste said quietly. "Just 5 minutes alone." Eleanor's face softened slightly. "Celeste, I know this isn't what you wanted, but sometimes we have to sacrifice our own desires for the greater good. Victoria will come back eventually. You just need to buy us time until she does. Left alone in the bridal suite, Celeste walked to the window overlooking the cathedral courtyard. Below, she could see the photographers waiting, their cameras, ready to capture the perfect wedding shots. Guests milled about in their finest attire. Society's elite gathered to witness the union of two powerful families. She thought about Victoria, probably already on a plane to some distant destination, free to pursue whatever or whoever had made her run. Her sister had always been able to escape the consequences of her actions, leaving others to clean up the mess. This time that someone was Celeste. The organ music swelled, signaling that it was time. Celeste took a deep breath and made her choice. Not for Eleanor's threats or her family's financial security, but for the man waiting at the altar who deserved better than to be abandoned without explanation. She would walk down that aisle. She would speak the vows in Victoria's place. Somehow, she would find a way to make this right. The cathedral doors opened, and Celeste stepped into her sister's life, carrying secrets that would change everything for the man who couldn't see her face but might somehow see her heart. The music reached its crescendo as she began her walk toward Julian Blackwood, each step taking her further from the truth and deeper into a deception that would test everything she thought she knew about love, sacrifice, and redemption. As she approached the altar, Julian turned slightly toward the sound of her footsteps. Even without sight, his posture was confident, commanding. When she reached his side, he smiled, and for a moment Celeste forgot to breathe. "You smell different," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "Like jasmine instead of roses." Her heart stopped. He knew. Somehow he already knew. But instead of calling out the deception, Julian simply extended his hand to her. And she took it, sealing both their fates with that single touch. The Blackwood mansion stood like a fortress against the evening sky, its windows glowing with warm light that seemed to promise sanctuary. Celeste sat in the back of the limousine, still wearing Victoria's wedding dress, watching as her new home came into view. Julian sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on his knee, fingers occasionally tapping a silent rhythm that spoke of nervous energy. The wedding reception had been a blur of congratulations and champagne toasts. Celeste had smiled until her cheeks ached, accepting well wishes from strangers who called her Victoria. Each kind word felt like a tiny betrayal, but Julian's presence beside her had been steadying. He had guided her through the social maze with practiced ease, his hand warm and sure on her arm. "Nervous?" Julian asked as the car pulled into the circular driveway. Celeste turned to study his profile in the dim light. "A little," she admitted. The honesty slipping out before she could stop it. Victoria would have laughed, would have made some flirtatious comment about wedding night expectations. But Celeste found herself drawn to truth, even in small doses. Julian's smile was gentle. "Thomas has prepared the blue suite for you. I thought you might want your own space while you adjust to being here." Relief flooded through her. She had been dreading this moment, wondering how she would navigate the intimate expectations of a wedding night with a man who was essentially a stranger. Thomas greeted them at the front door, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Welcome home, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. Shall I show Mrs. Blackwood to her rooms?" "Actually," Julian said, his head tilting slightly toward Celeste, "would you like to see the music room first?" "Oh no, you mentioned enjoying piano." Celeste's heart skipped. Victoria had mentioned no such thing. Julian was testing her, probing gently to confirm what he already suspected. She could lie, could pretend to remember a conversation that never happened. Instead, she chose a different path. "I would love that," she said softly. "Oh, I should warn you, I'm not very good at playing." Julian's eyebrows rose slightly. Victoria was an accomplished pianist, had been taking lessons since childhood. Another crack in the facade. The music room took Celeste's breath away. A grand piano dominated the center of the space, its ebony surface reflecting the light from a crystal chandelier. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens that were shrouded in evening shadows. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes of sheet music and literature. "It's beautiful," Celeste whispered, and meant it. Julian moved to the piano with the confidence of long familiarity. His fingers found the keys without hesitation, and he began to play something hauntingly beautiful. The melody was melancholy, yet hopeful, like rain after a long drought. "Chopin," he said without stopping. "Nocturne, in E-flat major." "Your favorite, remember?" Another test? Victoria's favorite had been Mozart, bright and showy pieces that allowed her to display her technical skill. Celeste stood frozen, caught between truth and deception once again. "Actually," she said quietly, "I've always preferred Debussy. Something about the way he paints with music." Julian's hands stilled on the keys. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. When he finally turned toward her, his expression was unreadable. "Claire de Lune. Wait. How did you know?" "Lucky guess." But his smile suggested it was anything but luck. His fingers moved across the keys again, and the opening notes of Debussy's masterpiece filled the room. Celeste closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. This was her favorite piece, had been since she was a child. Something about its gentle melancholy spoke to her artist's soul. "You're crying," Julian observed, though he continued playing. Celeste touched her cheek, surprised to find it wet. "The music is just so beautiful. Or perhaps you're overwhelmed by everything that's happened today." She looked at him sharply, but his expression revealed nothing. Did he know? Did he suspect? Or was he simply being kind to a bride who might be having second thoughts? "Julian," she began, then stopped. What could she say? That she wasn't who? He thought she was. That she was falling in love with him even as she deceived him. "Yes, thank you for being patient with me. I know today must have been confusing." He finished the piece and turned fully toward her. Confusing is one word for it. Illuminating might be another. Heat flooded her cheeks. "What do you mean?" "Mean that the woman I married today is not quite the woman I expected to marry." His voice was gentle, without accusation. "But perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing." Over the following days, Celeste found herself settling into a routine that felt both foreign and natural. She woke early and took her coffee in the sunroom, watching the gardens come alive with morning light. Julian joined her most mornings, and they would talk about books, about music, about everything except the obvious questions hanging between them. She discovered that he was nothing like the cold businessman she had imagined. Of humor that caught her off guard. He listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words mattered. No one had ever made her feel so heard. "Tell me about your art," he said one morning over breakfast. Celeste nearly choked on her coffee. "My art. You have paint under your fingernails. Acrylic, I think, from the slight chemical scent. There's a callus on your right hand, consistent with holding a brush for long periods." She stared at him in amazement. Victoria had never touched a paintbrush in her life, was allergic to anything that might stain her perfect manicure. "How do you know so much about art supplies?" "I wasn't always blind," he said simply. "I used to paint before the accident. Landscapes mostly, though I was never very good at capturing light." "Light is the hardest thing," Celeste said without thinking. "It's not just what you see, it's what you feel. The warmth of morning sun is different from the coolness of moonlight, even if they're the same color on canvas." Julian leaned forward, his attention completely focused on her. "Show me." "What?" "Paint for me. Describe what you see while you work. Help me remember what light looks like." That afternoon, they moved to the conservatory, where the glass walls provided perfect natural lighting. Celeste set up her easel, her hands shaking slightly as she mixed colors on her palette. Julian sat nearby, listening as she worked. "The light coming through the glass is golden," she said, her brush moving across the canvas. "Not harsh gold, like jewelry, but soft gold like honey. It's catching the edges of the leaves on that fern, turning them almost transparent." "What about the shadows?" "Purple," she said immediately. "Deep purple, with hints of blue. People think shadows are gray or black, but they're not. They're full of color, especially purple." Julian smiled. "I never noticed that before. Most people don't. They see what they expect to see instead of what's really there." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Julian's head tilted slightly, and Celeste realized he understood the double meaning perfectly. As the days passed, she found herself looking forward to their conversations. To the quiet moments when they shared the same space without need for words. He would read while she painted, his voice filling the room with poetry or passages from novels. Sometimes she would play simple melodies on the piano while he listened, his face peaceful in a way that made her heart ache. "You're different from what I expected," he told her one evening as they walked through the garden. "Different how? Quieter? More thoughtful? Before, you always seemed to be performing, putting on a show for whoever was watching. Now, you seem more like yourself." Celeste's step faltered. "Maybe marriage changes people," maybe he agreed. "Maybe some people just need the right circumstances to show who they really are." His hand found hers as they walked, their fingers intertwining, naturally. The touch sent warmth shooting up her arm, and she wondered if he could feel her pulse racing where his thumb brushed against her wrist. That night, as she lay in her bed in the blue suite, Celeste stared at the ceiling and acknowledged the truth. She had been avoiding. She was falling in love with Julian Blackwood. Not with his money or his status, but with the man who listened to her paint, who made her coffee exactly how she liked it without being asked, who never made her feel like she had to be anyone other than who she was. The irony was bitter. She had found the love of her life while pretending to be someone else. And every day that passed made the deception harder to bear and harder to confess. Down the hall, she could hear Julian playing piano, the melody drifting through the walls like a lullaby. He was playing Claire de Lune again, and she wondered if he was thinking of her. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure, because tomorrow would bring them one day closer to the moment when the truth would have to come out. When it did, she wasn't sure if the love growing between them would be strong enough to survive the revelation that their entire relationship was built on a lie. The sound of heels clicking against marble echoed through the Blackwood mansion like gunshots. Celeste looked up from her easel in the conservatory, her brush suspended mid-stroke as a chill ran down her spine. She knew that particular rhythm, that confident stride that announced its owner's presence before she even appeared. Victoria had returned. Well, came the familiar voice from the doorway. "Look at you, playing house with my husband." Celeste turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Victoria stood framed in the doorway like a vengeful goddess, her platinum hair perfectly styled, her red lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, and her eyes glittered with malicious amusement. "Victoria?" The name came out as barely a whisper. "Surprised to see me, little sister?" Victoria stepped into the conservatory, her gaze taking in the easel, the paint-stained apron Celeste wore, the comfortable domesticity of the scene. "I have to admit, I'm impressed. When I left you to clean up my mess, I never imagined you'd actually try to replace me permanently." "It wasn't like that," Celeste said, setting down her brush with trembling fingers. "I was trying to help." "Help?" Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "You were trying to steal my life, my husband, my home, my future. Did you really think I wouldn't come back? Where have you been?" The question burst out of Celeste before she could stop it. "You left Julian at the altar. You abandoned everything." Victoria's smile faltered for just a moment. "I had cold feet. It happens to the best of us. But I'm back now, ready to claim. What's mine? What's yours?" Anger flared in Celeste's chest, surprising her with its intensity. "Julian isn't a possession, Victoria. He's a person with feelings, and you hurt him." "Oh, please." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Julian Blackwood is a business arrangement. A very profitable one, I might add. The fact that he's attractive is just a bonus." "You don't love him, love?" Victoria's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "Since when do you believe in fairy tales, Celeste? This is about money, power, security. Love is a luxury neither of us can afford." "I can't do this anymore," Celeste said, her voice growing stronger. "I won't pretend to be you. Have a choice." Victoria's mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath her beautiful facade. "I've already spoken to Mother. The story is simple. I had a brief nervous breakdown brought on by wedding stress. A few days at a private spa to recover, and now I'm back, ready to be the perfect wife. Julian will know the difference. Julian is blind, darling. He'll see what I tell him to see." Victoria moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Besides, what alternative do you have?" Confess that you've been lying to him for weeks. Tell him that the woman he's been falling for doesn't actually exist. The words hit Celeste like physical blows. Every fear she had harbored, every doubt that had kept her awake at night, Victoria had voiced with cruel precision. He cares about me, Celeste said, but her voice lacked conviction. He cares about who he thinks you are, but you're not me, Celeste, or never have been. You're the quiet one, the background player, the shadow. Without my name, my identity, you're nothing. Tears stung Celeste's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're wrong, am I? Victoria tilted her head, studying her sister like a scientist examining a specimen.
And tell me, what exactly do you plan to do?
Run away together? Build a life based on deception? How long do you think that will last? Before Celeste could answer, another voice cut through the tension. As long as it needs to. Both women turned toward the doorway where Julian stood, his presence filling the space with quiet authority. His face was carefully composed, but Celeste could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. Julian, Victoria said, her voice immediately shifting to honey-sweet tones.
Darling, you're just in time. I was explaining to Celeste
that her little masquerade is over. Julian stepped into the room, his cane tapping softly against the floor. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. The only masquerade I see is the one you're performing right now. Victoria's confidence wavered. I don't know what you mean, don't you? Julian moved with careful precision until he stood between the two sisters. The woman I married 3 weeks ago has gentle hands that shake slightly when she's nervous.
Ow.
She hums unconsciously when she paints. She takes her coffee with cream and 2 sugars, not black. She reads poetry aloud because she knows I love the sound of her voice. Victoria's face was flushing red. I can explain the woman I married, Julian continued, his voice growing warmer, sees colors and shadows. She makes me laugh without trying. She listens to my stories about the business world with genuine interest, not because she has to, but because she wants to understand what matters to me. He turned towards Celeste, and even though he couldn't see her, she felt the full force of his attention. The woman I married has been pretending to be someone else, but ironically, she's been more herself than the person she was imitating ever was. Celeste's breath caught. You knew? Julian's smile was soft, full of tenderness that made her heart ache. I suspected from the first day, confirmed it within the first week. You taste different when you kiss me goodnight. You smell like jasmine, and paint thinner instead of expensive perfume. Your laugh is quieter but more genuine. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I was falling in love with you, not with who I thought you were supposed to be. He reached out his fingers, finding her face with unerring accuracy. I was falling in love with Celeste, not Victoria. Victoria made a sound of disgust. This is ridiculous. Julian, you can't possibly prefer her to me. I'm beautiful, sophisticated, everything a man of your status should want. Julian turned toward her, his expression cool. You're also cruel. Selfish and incapable of genuine emotion. You left me at the altar, Victoria. Even if I wanted you back, which I don't, that kind of betrayal isn't something I could forgive. You're making a mistake, Victoria said, her voice rising with desperation. She's nothing special. Without my identity, she's just ordinary. You're right, Julian said quietly. She is ordinary in all the best ways. She doesn't need to be anyone else to be extraordinary. Celeste felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in weeks, they were tears of relief rather than fear. Victoria's face twisted with rage. Fine, have your little nobody. But don't come crawling back when you realize what you've given up. She spun on her heel and stalked toward the door, but paused at the threshold. Oh, and Celeste, Mother's going to cut you off completely. No more family money, no more support. You'll have nothing. She'll have me, Julian said simply. After Victoria left, the conservatory fell into silence. Celeste and Julian stood facing each other, the weight of truth finally settled between them. I'm sorry, Celeste whispered. I'm so sorry for lying. To you, for deceiving you on our wedding day. I never meant for it to go this far. Julian stepped closer, his hands finding her shoulders. Why did you do it? To protect you. To protect my family. Mother said you would destroy us financially if the wedding didn't happen, and I couldn't let that happen. But then I got to know you, and I fell in love with you, and every day made the lie harder to bear. And now?
Ow.
Celeste looked up at him. This man who had seen through her deception but loved her anyway? Now, I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me. Julian's answer was a kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. There's something else you should know, he said. Dr. Helena Rivers contacted me yesterday. She's developed a new surgical technique that might restore my sight. Celeste's heart stopped. That's wonderful. Is it? Julian's voice was uncertain. Part of me wants to see you, to know what you look like when you smile. But part of me is afraid that if I can see, I might start judging by appearances instead of essence. You won't, Celeste said with absolute certainty, because that's not who you are. Will you be there? When I have the surgery, if you want me to be, I want you to be the first thing I see, Julian said. My wife, my real wife, the woman I chose, not the one who was chosen for me. 3 months later, Celeste sat beside Julian's hospital bed, holding his hand as Dr. Rivers slowly removed the bandages from his eyes. The surgery had been a success, but this moment would determine whether Julian would truly see again. Ready? Dr. Rivers asked. Julian squeezed Celeste's hand. Ready. The final bandage fell away, and Julian blinked slowly in the soft light. His eyes, still slightly unfocused, moved around the room before finally settling on Celeste's face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then a smile spread across his features, bright and wondering. You're beautiful, he whispered. Even more beautiful than I imagined. Celeste laughed through her tears. Really, really. Julian reached up to touch her face, his fingers tracing the features he had known by touch alone. But you know what the amazing thing is? What? I loved you before I could see you. And that hasn't changed. You're still the same woman who reads to me in the evenings, who sees purple in shadows, who makes me laugh without trying. He pulled her closer, his newly seeing eyes bright with love. You're still my Celeste. As he kissed her, Celeste realized that sometimes the best love stories begin with deception, but find their way to truth. Sometimes the person you're meant to be with sees you clearly, even when they can't see it all. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is not the person you think they want, but the person you truly are. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Julian pulled back from the kiss and looked out at the view, his eyes wide with wonder at seeing colors again. It's beautiful, he breathed. Yes, Celeste agreed. But she wasn't looking at the sunset. She was looking at him, at the man who had taught her that true love doesn't need perfect vision to see a perfect heart. It really is.